My sister-in-law, a cold-headed law firm partner, always overwhelmed. With her intellectual charisma and a figure so perfect it was hard to believe she was in her 40s. But that day, the fact that her door, which should have been firmly shut, was left slightly ajar was the beginning of the tragedy. Through the gap in the door, where I meant to deliver some documents, the woman I saw was not the cold lawyer I knew. Her hair was messy, her face was flushed, and she was breathing heavily as she gave herself over to pleasure. I was frozen in place, unable to do anything but stare for a long while. Just as I came to my senses and tried to turn back, my body betrayed me. My lower half, which was naturally larger than most, had swelled up absurdly as if to tear the fabric of my pants. In my panic, the moment I scratched my head, I made eye contact with my sister-in-law. I expected her to scream, but she calmly got out of bed and stared directly into my eyes. Then she dropped her gaze downward and asked with a strange smile on her lips, "Brother-in-law, did that absurdly large thing happen because you were looking at me? Will we really end up crossing this precarious line?" If you are curious about the rest of this forbidden night, please hit subscribe and like before the video starts. Starting right now. The story I'm telling today is a brutal and scorching record of what happened behind the high walls of that luxurious mansion in Penyo, a story that can never be told to anyone. Hello, my name is Park Hyun-woo and I am 44 years old this year. Others say that once you pass 40, you've entered the mid-game of life and should only look forward, but honestly, my life is far from that kind of intensity. I currently live in a magnificent rural estate in Panyo, Gyeonggi-do, with my parents who are over 70, Evie. A 44-year-old bachelor living off his parents. Ooh. I may look like an immature playboy from the outside, but in truth, I have lived my whole life without want simply because I am the youngest son of this family. In the shadow of the hundreds of billions in assets and real estate that my father built, I hold a business card that says Director. But that's just an empty title. I only show my face at the company once or twice a week when I feel like it, and I spend most of my time at golf courses, luxury hotel lounges, or out drinking with college friends. Our house in Pangyo is a mansion in every sense of the word. High walls completely block out the outside world, and in the well-manicured garden, expensive trees show off their beauty with every season. I use the entire second floor of this large house almost by myself, enjoying my freedom. Thanks to growing up wealthy, my standards have always been sky high, and I've never stopped dating. I could have any woman I wanted, and my youth and wealth always made me the star of every glamorous night. But once I passed my prime, all those things started to feel a bit dull. No matter how much expensive whiskey I poured, the hole in my chest wouldn't fill, and when I returned to my massive mansion alone, after a boisterous night out, an inexplicable emptiness would wash over me. My parents seemed to have given up on my marriage, and I just lived day by day, thinking it was enough to just enjoy life as it came. But I never dreamed that a storm would arrive that day to shake my entire life to its core. Because here, amidst the peaceful and languid routine of Pangyo, I was already facing a woman who would paralyze every ounce of my reason in an instant. Classic music flows through our living room every morning, and a meal carefully prepared by our housekeeper is set on the table. I always lingered in that elegant atmosphere like a stranger. Yet, even to my eyes, there was one person in our family who commanded absolute awe. It was Sekohi, my third sister-in-law, who had joined our family by marrying my third older brother. That day, as usual, I was lounging in bed until late afternoon, nursing a hangover. It was just an ordinary afternoon with a throbbing head and a bone-dry mouth. Just as I was about to head downstairs for some water, my phone rang loudly. It was my third brother. I was surprised that he was calling at this hour, as he was usually swamped with work, but when I picked up, his voice was filled with sheer desperation. "Hanwoo, you're at home, right? I'm going crazy here. I have a meeting with an overseas buyer today, and I think I left the blue folder with the most important business files in the study. It's too late to send it by courier, so could you look through the study or our annex and bring it to me? It's really urgent, Hyunwoo." I hated being bothered with errands, but I had no excuse to refuse such an earnest request from my usually strict brother. I threw on some clothes and headed toward the annex where my brother and his wife lived. The independent space was separated from the main house where my parents lived by a garden. It was like a sanctuary in our household, a place where I usually felt cautious about even knocking. The cool air of the annex brushed against my skin. I first searched the study for the blue folder my brother mentioned, but it was nowhere to be found. The only place left was their bedroom, where the private warmth of my brother and sister-in-law lingered. There shouldn't be anyone here. My sister-in-law should be in a meeting at her consulting firm by now. Anyway. I calmed myself down and slowly turned that heavy bedroom doorknob, which I had never touched once in my entire life. And the moment that door opened, my life took a forbidden path from which there was no turning back. My third sister-in-law, Seo Ije, who overwhelmed me with her cold, intellectual charisma, Just before I faced the true face hidden behind her perfect exterior, my heart began to pound wildly with an unexplainable, ominous premonition. Everyone, do you know what kind of person my third sister-in-law, Seo Ije, is? She is 46 this year. Though she is only 2 years older than me, she was a being on a completely different level from any woman I'd ever met. She graduated top of her class from a prestigious law school and is now the head of the Korean branch of a world-renowned foreign consulting firm. The energy she radiated was as sharp as her brilliant background, bordering on cold. I still cannot forget the moment she first, and the air in the entire room changed in an instant. With her model-like height, hair neatly combed back without a single stray strand, and impeccable suits. She always walked through our living room wearing sharp, tailored outfits. The clicking sound of her thick heels hitting the marble floor sounded like the snap of a whip pressing down on my heart. She possessed the refined grace unique to an educated person. Every word she spoke was imbued with class, and while she was kind to everyone, there was a transparent glass wall within that kindness that made her impossible to approach. To her eyes, a good-for-nothing young master like me, living recklessly off my parents' wealth, must have looked like nothing more than an immature child. In fact, every time our eyes met, I felt a strange sense of inferiority, along with an odd, ticklish tension at the bottom of my heart. My sister-in-law was the very definition of a perfect career woman. The way she woke up at dawn to jog, read the daily newspaper thoroughly, and drank espresso seemed like something out of a magazine pictorial. My third brother was also a man of outstanding ability, but standing next to her, he somehow seemed to lose his shine. She was the discipline and pride of this family, to the point that even the elders wouldn't dare speak down to her. However, mind you, the instinct of a man is truly terrifying. The way her slender ankles would peek out as she left the front door with her briefcase, or the way she would shine with an intellectual gaze over her glasses while on business calls, drove me crazy. Even knowing that she was someone I dared not touch or even imagine, my eyes kept chasing her perfect silhouette. "Young master, you're up early again today. Sometimes when we crossed paths in the living room on weekend mornings, she would greet me with a faint smile. The subtle, cold scent of perfume that drifted from her each time felt like a poison numbing my nervous system. I could only muster a simple yes. "Good morning to you too, sister-in-law," was all I managed to say, but my heart was already burning hot inside. What kind of expression would such a perfect, intelligent woman have in bed? What kind of skin would be hidden beneath those tightly fastened blouse buttons? Even as I indulged in such cheeky fantasies, I would soon shake my head and reproach myself. "Pull yourself together, Hanwoo. That woman is your third brother's wife and gem of this household. But the human heart is truly fickle, isn't it? Knowing I cannot have her makes me crave her more, and because she seems unreachable, she feels all the more provocative. My sister-in-law and my brother have 2 children who are studying abroad. After the children left, their relationship appeared peaceful on the surface, but a strange silence hung between them. My brother was always out with business excuses, and my sister-in-law also clung to her work like a workaholic. I sometimes wondered, why does my brother stay out so much, leaving behind such a beautiful and elegant woman? If I were her husband, I wouldn't leave her alone for even a single second. Her existence was both a fierce longing and a cruel torture to me. Living under the same roof, close enough to hear her breathing, yet a star I could never reach, she always passed by me gracefully, as if walking on clouds. I would just hold onto the lingering scent of her and indulge in futile fantasies every night. But let me tell you, who could have known that the solid fortress of this cold, perfect career woman would crumble in the most naked way at a moment I never expected, never expected. And that I would be the one to witness the raw, burning desire hidden behind that perfect dignity. Pushed by my brother's urgent voice, that day into that forbidden place, I was moments away from facing a scene I would never forget, or rather one that would steal my very soul away. When I stood before the bedroom door, after walking down the quiet hallway, I didn't realize it. The fact that waiting for me beyond that door was not the cold sister-in-law I knew, but a woman burning with heat. Now I reach for the handle of that forbidden door, and sweat begins to form on the back of my hand. What in the world is waiting for me on the other side of that door? Everyone, fate is truly cruel. The garden of the Pangyo mansion was much quieter than usual that afternoon. Under the blazing sun, all I could hear was the sound of the fountain splashing. I was lounging on the sofa, clinging to the tail end of a hangover as usual, when a call from my third brother completely shattered my peace. My brother's voice was urgent. He said an important blue file, essential for a deal with a buyer, was somewhere in the guest house. Henwoo, please, I'm begging you. If it's not in the study, check the vanity or the nightstand in the bedroom. My wife said she'd be home late today, so just take your time and look for it. That one phrase from my brother, take your time and look for it, was the beginning of my trouble. I dragged myself up, pushed past my lethargy, left the main house, and crossed the garden toward the guest house. The guest house is a private space strictly for my brother and sister-in-law. It's like a sanctuary in our home where even the housekeeper only enters at designated times. As I scanned my fingerprint and stepped inside, the cold, sophisticated air unique to my sister-in-law, so different from the main house, enveloped me. I searched the study thoroughly. Inside the desk drawers, even between the bookshelves. But that damn blue folder my brother mentioned was nowhere to be seen. I started to break into a sweat. Time was ticking, and my brother's pestering text messages kept chiming in. The only place left was their bedroom, where my brother and sister-in-law slept together. Lokisi ah. My feet felt as heavy as lead. Call it a man's instinct, even if we are family. The mere thought of stepping into my sister-in-law's private space made my throat go completely dry. Standing before the bedroom door, I hesitated for a moment. Should I go in? She must be at the office, right? I asked myself that question several times. I was certain there would be no one there. After all, she is the CEO of a foreign consulting firm. She couldn't possibly be home in the middle of the day. I wiped my damp hands on my pants and grabbed the cold metal handle. My heartbeat echoed loudly in my ears. It wasn't just simple nervousness. It might have been a brazen and secret thrill at the thought of peering into the most intimate space of the woman I always admired and looked up to. I'm sorry, sister-in-law. My brother said he desperately needed these documents. Giving myself an excuse that no one would hear, I slowly turned the doorknob. The door cracked open, and the scene inside began to enter my field of vision. In the dimly lit bedroom, the scent of the cool perfume she always wore wafted toward me. I poked my head inside, intending to grab the documents as quietly as possible and leave. But at that very moment, I froze in my tracks. A cold shudder ran down my spine. No, rather than a thrill, it felt like something like hot magma was piercing through my entire body. My imagination was completely off the mark, and my certainty was shattered to pieces. There was someone on the bed that should have been empty. The thin blanket on the bed was shaking irregularly. Instead of the ticking of a clock, a strange sound I had never heard before filled the air of the quiet room. It was the rough, breathless, and intensely hot panting of a woman. I held my breath. It felt as if my heart would burst. I couldn't tell if what I was seeing was reality or a vicious hallucination created by a hangover. My feet wouldn't move at all. Rather than my reason screaming at me to close the door and run, a primal curiosity to see what was beyond the crack in the door consumed me. With trembling hands, I held the doorknob and turned my gaze toward the scene that I should not have seen, a sight that would become the sin of my lifetime. The air in the room was already heated to the point of stifling. My third sister-in-law, Sehoyahi, the very embodiment of intellectual beauty. She was struggling, alone on that bed, in the most primal state imaginable, ma. Everyone, how should I explain that moment? I was someone who prided myself on having met countless women and having spent as many passionate nights as one could wish for. But the scene that poured in through the crack in the door shattered all the order of the world I knew in an instant. On that bed, it wasn't the high-minded and cold third sister-in-law Siohi, whom I usually looked up to. There, only a woman like a beast, starved for desire, existed. My sister-in-law was lying there with her eyes gently closed, a thin silk blanket draped only over her waist. However, her legs revealed beneath the blanket were slightly parted, and those elegant hands that usually carried a briefcase and toyed with a sharp pen were now headed somewhere completely different. The silhouette of the blanket shook rhythmically and violently. I didn't need to see to know where her fingers were lingering and what she was craving. The moans flowing from her lips were not the intellectual voice I had imagined. It was a damp, sticky, and ancient sound that felt as if it might melt away at any moment. Shaking her head from side to side, her disheveled hair scattered across the pillow. Her perfect hairstyle, which usually never allowed a single strand out of place, was ruinously messy, but paradoxically, that look was more captivating than anything I had ever seen. I even forgot how to breathe. With my eye pressed tight against the door crack, all my nerves were focused on the secret ritual unfolding on the bed. My sister-in-law's face was flushed deep red. Thin beads of sweat gathered on her forehead, glistening like jewels under the light, and her chest rose and fell as if it would burst with every labored breath. As her movements quickened, the heat in the room intensified. I saw it. The raw pleasure she tried to suppress by biting her lip, yet couldn't help but let out. Was she distant from my brother? Yes, Or was it an explosion of instincts long repressed within the prison of her perfect social status? Whatever the reason, it didn't matter. What stood before me now was neither the law firm CEO nor my third sister-in-law, but simply a beautiful lioness surrendering herself to pleasure. My body was already beyond control. My mind screamed at me to shut the door and leave immediately, but my eyes, my heart, and the instinct between my legs remained rooted to the spot. Instead, an ugly desire to see more clearly and to feel her hot breath from closer began to dominate my entire body. As if she were the only person in the world, she was completely immersed in her own sensations, oblivious to anyone else's gaze. The sight of that once haughty woman crumbling alone stimulated both my masculine possessiveness and a strange sense of sadism. Sister-in-law, to think you had this side to you, I was trembling. The fact that such hot lava was flowing beneath the cold gaze that usually ignored me drove me insane. The room was filled entirely with the scent of her skin and heavy hot air. As if bewitched, I tightened my grip on the doorknob. I wanted to capture her ecstatic expression just a little bit closer, just a little bit more. My lower half was already swollen to the point of bursting, to the extent that it was painful in my trousers. My instincts, which were innately stronger than others, who surged in response to every one of her moans. But the cruel hand of fate would not leave me be. I had been so focused that I hadn't realized my center of gravity was gradually shifting forward, My fingers, trying to pry the door open just a crack more, slipped, and the door to this sanctuary, which should have remained firmly shut, swung wide open with a pathetic sound. Everyone, that moment, felt like the world had stopped. Without even a creak, the heavy bedroom door could not withstand the weight of my cowardly curiosity and swung wide open, in vain. In that split second, I lost my balance, my body lurched into the room, and I tumbled onto the floor before I could even try to steady myself. A dull sound broke the silence and filled the room. A chilling pain shot through me as my knees hit the hard wooden floor, but nothing null. When I lifted my head while prone on the floor, a grim reality awaited me, one I could never have imagined even in my worst nightmares. A short, sharp scream. Hija, my sister-in-law, bolted up from the bed like a spring. Her eyes were filled with terror and shock, and the pupils that had been swimming in pleasure just moments ago were instantly replaced by cold shame. With trembling hands, she snatched the silk gown beside her to cover her body. But it was already too late. Her disheveled hair, flushed cheeks, and heavy, ragged breathing served as undeniable evidence, heating the air in the room. Hima, kama, he. I remained prone on the floor, unable to even draw a breath. Cold sweat poured down my spine, and my mouth was so dry, my tongue felt stuck to the roof of my mouth. I had essentially trampled upon the secret of the most respected and perfect woman in this household. Why, young master, what are you doing here, Wada? Her voice was trembling. The charisma that usually overwhelmed dozens in courtrooms and conference rooms was gone, replaced only by the desperation of a violated woman. I hurriedly tried to stand, but my legs gave way, causing me to stumble repeatedly. I'm so sorry, sister-in-law. It's not like that. My brother, he said he had an urgent file. I thought you weren't here, since it wasn't in the study. My excuse was pathetic, and my voice stuttered miserably. Had she realized that I had been peeking at her through the crack in the door? Or would she think it was just an unlucky accident? My mind was in turmoil, ready to explode with tens of thousands of thoughts. But stronger than any of those thoughts was the intense shame filling this cramped room. Sister-in-law Hija sat on the edge of the bed, pulling her gown tight, and stared right through me. Her gaze felt like a sharp blade tearing my entire body to shreds. The silence felt so long that 1 minute stretched into a year. In the quiet room, only my ragged breathing and her still lingering heavy gasps intersected, creating a strange harmony. I couldn't lift my head. Staring only at the floor, I desperately prayed for time to stop, or for me to vanish from this spot right then and there. But, it was a strange thing. Even amidst the extreme embarrassment and guilt, my instincts refused to stop. Her secret movements I had just witnessed, and those wild moans were branded into my mind, igniting my body even further. Young master, get up for now. You're not going to just stay on the floor like that, are you? Her coldly sunken voice drifted toward me. A voice that seemed to be forcibly regaining its reason, yet still drenched in moisture. As if obeying her command, I struggled to pull myself up. And instinctively, I scratched my head, trying to avoid her gaze. But there was one thing I had overlooked. My body had long since betrayed my reason. Even as I rolled on the floor, blushing with shame, I was harder and more massive, engorged down there than ever before. A hideous bulge looking as if it would burst through my thin slacks, and my innate natural superiority was revealing its presence most explicitly at this very tragic moment. My sister-in-law's gaze began to move slowly, very slowly, down from my face. And the moment her eyes stopped on that blatant curve in my pants, the tension in the room flared up, hot like gunpowder, about to explode. Do you know that fleeting moment? The kind of stifling silence where even the dust floating in the air seems to stop. I rose from the floor, but my soul had already been completely rattled out of me. Having regained her cold composure, my sister-in-law Hije sat at the edge of the bed, staring straight at me. That chilling look was as if she were saying, "Brother-in-law, how are you going to explain this situation?" It felt like a stern interrogation, demanding an answer. Like a sinner, I hung my head and just scratched at my hair. "I am sorry. I am truly sorry." I repeated those words like a parrot, staring only at my toes. But my body was acting separately from my reason. The fiery movements I had just seen through the crack in the door, the wet moans that had struck my ears, those after-images were stimulating every single brain cell, making me even harder and more massively engorged. "Brother-in-law," my sister-in-law called me. But her voice was strange. It sounded angry and perhaps embarrassed, but the edge of it was trembling ever so slightly. I flinched, intending to look at her, but when I realized her gaze was fixed not on me but on what was below, goosebumps broke out all over my body. Hije's eyes were locked onto my trousers as if she were possessed by something. I had always been innately larger than other men. While that had been my only source of pride at this very moment, it was a symbol of humiliation that made me want to die. My thin summer dress slacks were far too weak to hide my ruthless excitement. That bulging trace, rising hideously and explicitly as if to burst through my pants. It was damning evidence revealing exactly what I was thinking and how much my body was craving my sister-in-law. It felt as if time had come to a standstill. She stared at that spot without even blinking. Those sharp eyes, which usually tore through countless documents and cases, now seemed to be deciphering the massive desire hidden inside my trousers. I hurriedly shoved my hand into my pocket, trying to cover it up. I tried shifting my hips back into an awkward posture, but it was already too late. The air was still filled with a strange scent of skin and the lingering heat she had exhaled just moments ago. My heart began to race like a cornered rat. My face felt like it would burst from shame, but ironically, her piercing gaze only made my bulge harden even more abnormally. A very short sigh escaped between my sister-in-law's lips. A strange sound that I couldn't tell if it was a lament, surprise, or something else entirely. Clutching the collar of her robe tightly, she still couldn't take her eyes off that spot. I clearly saw a strange curiosity and agitation like nothing I had ever seen before, rippling in her typically aloof and perfect eyes. The room was once again plunged into a deep silence. But it was different from the silence before. It was a much heavier, more dangerous silence, like a powder keg ready to explode at any moment. I swallowed hard. That sound echoed as loudly as a thunderclap in the quiet room. She now lifted her head and looked me straight in the eyes. Her face seemed to have regained its usual composure, but her gaze was different. That look was burning hot, as if she already knew all the secrets inside my pants, or rather, as if she wanted to dig into them even deeper. I couldn't say a single word. No, even breathing felt like a sin. Those few short seconds waiting for her to speak felt like an eternity to me. Her red-stained lips slowly parted. Her voice was calm like a judge reading a verdict, but it was sharp and intimate, piercing through my chest like a dagger. Everyone, at that moment, it felt like the air in the room was thinning. After staring for a long time at the blatant bulge rising hideously against my trousers, Hija slowly raised her head to look me straight in the eyes. I wanted to look away out of shame, but her gaze held a strange pressure that made it impossible to move an inch. Usually she would have screamed and kicked me out immediately or looked at me with contempt as if I were a bug, imha. But the Seohi standing before me now was completely different. She straightened her collar, sat back deep on the bed and asked me, in an incredibly calm, low voice, "Young master, is that your reaction?" Her gaze swept over me once more before settling on my eyes. Ne joie. Did it get that big just looking at me? The moment those words hit my ears, my mind went completely blank. It was an incredibly explicit question. Hard to believe it came from the lips of the most virtuous woman in the family, a lof, firm representative, and my third sister-in-law. The word big drifted through the room like a ghost, carried by her elegant voice. I felt like my heart had stopped. I just stood there like a fool, my lips trembling, unable to utter a single word. Sister-in-law watched me without blinking, as if she were enjoying my embarrassment. A flush still lingered on her face, but her eyes were analyzing my instincts like a cold-blooded consultant, blind assaultant. You're not answering my question. Whether you came in by mistake or on purpose, your body doesn't seem to be lying, she said, slowly rising from the bed and stepping toward me. Even though the carpet silenced the sound of her heels with every step, I could feel her approach with every nerve in my body. The faint scent of her perfume mixed with the hot lingering traces of the pleasure she had just been enjoying, paralyzing my senses. Was my question too difficult? Or are you just as flustered by this situation as I am and refused to admit it? She stopped right in front of me. Her skin smooth enough to defy her 46 years, and her intelligent eyes pressed against me from up close. I tried to turn my head away, but she reached out and gently caught my chin. Her fingers were cold, but everywhere they touched my skin burned, as if it were on fire. Young master, I want to know, is that vicious desire truly meant for me, or is it just an accidental excitement caused by the situation? Her voice had become intimate, like a whisper in my ear. The barrier that usually kept me as the immature youngest brother crumbled, and through the cracks, the heavy, dense scent of a woman was pouring out. As she drew closer, my crotch swelled, even more ruthlessly, throbbing, as if to burst the seams of my trousers. I have been with many women in my life, but no one had ever rendered me so powerless with a single question. And to think it was her, my brother's wife, a woman so high above me I could barely look at her directly, referencing the size of my desire. Shame soon mingled with a strange carnal desire, beginning to hack away at my reason. Try answering me, Hanwoo. For the first time, she called me by my name. She had stripped away the social veneer of young master and addressed me as a man. I trembled at that summons. In her eyes, it wasn't the contempt that would mock my hideous instincts, but rather a mysterious longing rising from deep within, just as it was in me. I gasped for air and met her gaze. I didn't want to admit it, but my body was already giving the most honest answer to her words. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to open my mouth, because I knew that the moment I answered, yes, we would be crossing an irreversible river of taboo. My sister-in-law did not miss the tremor in my eyes. She raised the corner of her lips, looking satisfied, and I was completely lost to that cruelly beautiful smile. The control of this room now belonged not to me, but to her, the one standing there, nothing but a robe judging my desires. Everyone, when I heard that question, my mind went completely blank, as if a nuclear bomb had gone off. Did it get that big because of me? How could she say that? Those explicit words coming from the lips of the woman who had been the epitome of intelligence pierced my eardrums and lodged into every single one of my brain cells. I stood there like a fool, having forgotten not only how to answer, but even how to breathe. Down below, as if responding to her shocking question, I stirred even more, hideously threatening to burst the seams of my trousers. Every time her calm, yet heavy gaze drifted between my face and my trousers, I felt as if I had been stripped naked and thrown out onto the street. Shame, fear, and an unknown pleasure mingled together, tearing my reason to shreds. With trembling hands, I snatched up the blue file lying next to me. I am sorry. Sister-in-law, I am truly sorry. I stepped backward and blurted it out as if screaming. I had to run before she could say anything else, or rather, before her seductive scent could completely consume my soul. I stumbled over the threshold, but I didn't stop. As I burst out of the villa and crossed the garden, I felt her cold yet burning gaze fixed on my back, making goosebumps rise all over my body. I returned to my room, locked the door, and collapsed onto the bed, but my heart showed no signs of settling down. The pounding sound of it seemed to fill the entire room. But the real hell started from that moment on. Whether I closed my eyes or kept them open, her image was branded onto my retinas, refusing to fade away. The wet moans she let out while writhing alone on the bed, the hair stuck to her face with sweat and the glimpses of pale skin through her parted gown. Every fragment reassembled. It assembled itself in my mind, tormenting me. What drove me mad above all else was that calm voice looking me straight in the eye and asking the size of my desire. Did it grow like that because of me? Every time that auditory hallucination circled my ears, my body reacted mercilessly once again. Even though I had clearly run away, I felt as if my soul was still lying on that bedroom floor, lingering at her feet. By day I stared blankly at the ceiling, and by night I suffered from a terrible thirst. My sister-in-law was to me the very definition of a taboo. My brother's wife, the pillar of our family. Yet my instincts, as if ignoring such morality, craved only the image of her, as a woman that I had seen that day. Pouring alcohol down my throat was no use. As the potent spirit of the whiskey enveloped my body, my imagination only became more cruelly vivid. If the way she touched herself was meant for me, why did she not scream when she saw this secret hidden in my trousers? My trousers. The audacious questions that followed one after another ignited a dark flame in my chest. I have lived like a wreck since that day. Unable to go outside, I stayed holed up in my room, staring intently at the window of the detached house visible from mine. What if she were standing by the window? What if she too were thinking of me? I held on to such insane expectations. The grand mansion in Pangyo was no longer a lavish home to me, but a massive prison trapped by her phantom, Ik. Even in my dreams, she seduced me. She would slap my cheek wearing a cold lawyer suit, only to immediately dive into my arms wearing nothing but a silk gown. When I woke, my bed would be soaked in sweat and I would have to whisper her name in misery. Hee-jae, my sister, I knew I shouldn't be doing this. I felt deep in my bones that this was a path to ruin, a sin that would tear our entire family apart. But my friends, once a dam has burst, there is no stopping it. The wet gaze of hers that had entered my heart was already completely demolishing the dam of my reason. Thus a week passed like hell. I couldn't face her, so I made excuses to avoid every meal, but I knew I couldn't run away forever. Finally, the unavoidable family dinner arrived. The moment had come to face the owner of that voice, the one that destroyed me at that quiet, elegant dining table. Everyone, I truly don't know how that week went by. My room had already become a living hell, filled with the lingering traces of her. But I couldn't just hole up in my room like a beast forever. The inescapable day of the monthly family dinner finally arrived. The dining room in our Pangyo mansion felt unusually vast and cold that day. Like a cow being led to the slaughter, I took heavy steps and sat at the edge of the table. I felt like my heart was about to jump out of my chest. Just as I was clutching my chopsticks so hard that the veins on my hand popped, I heard that familiar, chilling sound of high heels clicking in the hallway. It was my sister-in-law. She appeared looking even more composed and perfect than usual, as if that shocking incident from a week ago had been nothing but a dream. From her sharp navy business suit and flawless bun, to the calm gaze behind her intellectual glasses. Oh, hello, brother-in-law. It's been a while, It's been so hard to see you lately. She sat down right next to me and offered a very natural smile. The smile was so elegant and dignified that it pierced my heart like a sharp dagger. Unable to properly lift my head, I replied in a faint, trembling voice, "Yes, sister-in-law, I've just been a bit tired." My brother and parents were busy talking business, completely unaware, but the warmth of her body and the subtle scent of her perfume beside me rang as loud as thunder in my ears. Did nothing really happen? Was the woman who looked at me and asked those explicit questions just a hallucination? But every time she lifted her spoon, the glimpse of her slender wrist and then neatly buttoned collar of her shirt set my mind ablaze with wicked fantasies. The fact that the hot, flushed skin I saw that day was hidden beneath that flawless suit. The fact that those calm lips had let out the most obscene and wet moans that day was driving me insane. The entire meal was sheer torture for me. I couldn't tell if the food was going into my nose or my mouth. My gaze kept falling onto her knees. Her legs were neatly pressed together, and the smooth sheen of her stockings flickered under the table. I kept imagining it over and over. If I unbuttoned that stiff suit one by one, would that red, flushed, naked body I saw that day be revealed again? Would those cold lips ask me about the size of my desires once more? Hanwoo, why are you picking at your food? Are you sick? At my brother's question, I jumped in surprise and lifted my head. That was when my eyes locked directly with my sister-in-law's. She was holding her wine glass to her lips, staring intently at me. But here's the thing, everyone, in that brief moment I saw it at. The way her eyes hid in behind her glasses shimmered ever so slightly, past her elegant smile. It was a clear provocation, and a confirmation of the dark secret that only the two of us shared. She answered for my brother, as if it were nothing. It seems the young master has a lot on his mind these days. At that age, everyone goes through a phase even more turbulent than puberty. Don't you agree, young master? Her calm voice tickled my ears. That wasn't just a simple joke. It was a secret whip, mocking my reason and prodding at my instincts. I eventually excused myself before even finishing my meal. I simply couldn't endure that suffocating tension any longer. My legs trembled as I climbed the stairs, back to my room. I feared her perfect mask, and I loathed myself even more for feeling excited, imagining what lay beneath it. But that night, when the sky over the Pangyo mansion grew dark and the downpour began, I realized that the smile at the table was only the beginning. As the torrential rain swallowed the entire house, that sound came from behind my locked door. Knock, knock. That rhythmic and cautious knocking was the prelude that would strip away the remaining reason in my life. Everyone, that night was exceptionally brutal. Outside the window, it was pouring rain as if the sky had torn open. The sound of rain battering the vast garden of the Pangyo mansion coiled around the house like a giant wave. In my dark room, without even turning on the lights, I tipped back my glass of whiskey and recalled my sister-in-law's chilling smile from dinner. My mind was already losing its grasp on reality. When I closed my eyes, the composed sister-in-law in her suit appeared, and when I closed them again, the disheveled version of her on the bed haunted me. It was a terrible fever. At 44, I was groaning, alone, chasing her phantom, like a boy in his first love, no, like a beast eyeing its prey. Please, sister-in-law, please just get out of my head, I groaned and pulled the blanket over my head. But it was useless. Just thinking of her name was enough to make me react ruthlessly, my trousers growing tight. As the rain grew louder, my heartbeat quickened. The sense of isolation, as if I were the only one left in this massive mansion, and the thirst for her in the other wing drove me mad. And that was when it happened. A very subtle sound could be heard. It was such a faint sound of the door opening that I almost missed it buried under the heavy rain. I thought I was hearing things. Who would come to my room at this hour? As I thought that and looked up, my heart stopped cold. The bedroom door was silently open, and a silhouette stood in the gap, backlit by the dim hall light. Sister-in-law? My voice trembled thinly. As my eyes adjusted to the dark, the identity of the silhouette slowly revealed itself. I couldn't believe it. The neat career woman I saw during the day was not there. Instead, it was my sister-in-law, standing there in nothing but a thin silk slip. Whether wet from the rain or fresh out of the shower, her hair hung damply over her shoulders, and the white skin peeking through shone brilliantly in the dark. She walked into the room without a word and closed the door. The click of the lock sounded as a guillotine blade falling in the silent room. Every step she took closer. The perfect curves of her body beneath the thin slip cruelly pierced my vision. Still awake, brother-in-law? Her voice was low and secretive. Mixed with the sound of the rain, her voice was completely different from what I heard at the table. It was thick and intensely seductive. She stopped right at the edge of my bed. The scent of damp skin and heavy perfume wafting from her stung my nostrils. I sat on the edge of the bed, unable to move a muscle. Sensing the situation, my body was already surging, unable to bear the throbbing tension. I could feel her gaze fixed on that explicit bulge in my pants even in the dark. Shame and excitement mingled to slash at my reason. Why are you here at this hour? You seemed to be in so much pain. I could practically hear you calling my name, unable to fall asleep. She slowly reached out and brushed her hand against my cheek. Wherever her cold fingertips touched, flames erupted. Her eyes were glowing with a strange intensity in the darkness. It was the gaze of a predator who had cornered its prey, and at the same time a hungry woman craving something to fill her. Now the grand mansion in Pangyo had become a wicked prison for the two of us. The rain outside grew fiercer, and I prepared to throw my remaining soul toward this forbidden existence standing before me. I realized it the moment the hem of her thin slip brushed against my knee. That tonight I would never be able to leave this room the same way I arrived. She stared straight into my eyes and slowly rested one knee onto my bed. Then she pressed her lips to my ear and began to whisper words of such wicked temptation that my last shred of reason snapped. Everyone, the air in my room at that moment grew as thin as if all the oxygen had burned away. Rain was pounding hard against the window, but All I could hear was the uneven breathing of Hija, my sister-in-law, now on my bed. Clad only in a thin silk slip, she stroked my cheek, then slowly leaned in, bringing her lips close to my ear. And in a low, intensely intimate voice, she whispered, "Young master, or should I say Hienwoo? I heard everything from outside. How you were struggling and calling out my name." The voice wasn't the cool professional tone usually heard in the law firm's conference room. It was the heavy, damp, and wickedly dense temptation of a woman. A shudder ran through my entire body. To think she already knew about those miserable, feverish moments when I was alone in my room, whispering her name to satisfy my desires. Myers. Shame washed over me like a tidal wave, but at the same time my body reacted wildly to her explicit confirmation. There's no need to be embarrassed. I was the same way. Ever since I saw your huge, explicit reaction in the guest bedroom. That day, I haven't been able to sleep, either. She gently lifted my chin and stared deep into my eyes. Even in the darkness, her pupils were gleaming with a strange heat. She took my hand and guided it toward her chest. Her burning temperature through the thin silk and her racing heartbeat were transmitted straight to my palm. We already share a secret we shouldn't have shown each other, don't we? A wicked secret that no one else can know, only the two of us. Her fingers traced down my neck and she began to slowly undo the buttons of my shirt. My reason was screaming, but my body was surrendering, like a slave to every one of her touches. She continued with a mysterious smile on her lips. If we've already crossed the point of no return, why not create another one? A secret much deeper, hotter, and one that we can never escape from. It wasn't just a simple temptation. It was a dangerous contract that would cost me my entire life and an invitation to hell that I could never refuse. She leaned in until she was inches from my lips, breathing out a hot sigh. Defying her 46 years, her body carried a fragrance that was both fresh like a budding flower and deeply intoxicating. Hanu. Your superior instincts are screaming that they want me, aren't they? I'm curious too. It was a shocking, almost cruel thing to say, wondering what that massive thing I had only seen until then would feel like inside her. That my third brother's wife, the pillar of this family, would provoke my masculinity so blatantly I could hold back no longer. The beast-like instinct I had suppressed shattered the bars of my reason and erupted forth. I hold of her slender waist. The smoothness of the silk beneath my palms and the resilient skin hidden underneath made my head spin. The rain outside grew wilder and the heat in the room rose like a volcano on the verge of eruption. There were no longer any young master or sister-in-law here. Only a man and a woman desperate to indulge in a wicked secret, hungered for each other in the darkness. I lowered my head toward her damp lips. This small room in the Pangong mansion was about to become the most dangerous and sweetest sanctuary of sin in the world. The moment had arrived for her cold mask to be completely stripped away, and for me to embrace the hot truth hidden beneath it, with my entire body. Everyone, at that moment, the cord of my reason snapped with a sharp clear sound. I could no longer remember my third brother's face, the family's honor, or the fear of tomorrow morning. Before my eyes was only that one hot woman tempting me to ruin, revealing her moonlight white skin through her thin slipper. With a beast-like groan, I clutched her slender waist and dragged her roughly to the center of my bed. She let out a short scream and collapsed into my arms. The moment her soft, firm body, defying her 46 years, pressed against my hot chest, I felt a shiver as if my whole body were burning up. Me were burning up. The noble crane-like figure I used to see in the living room was nowhere to be found. Wrapped in my arms, she was nothing but a flower, trembling at my every touch and surrendering herself to instinct. I devoured her lips hungrily. Instead of the scent of lipstick, her own thick, damp fragrance embedded itself deep into my lungs. We tore the clothes off each other. My shirt buttons flew everywhere, and her silk slip fell to the floor like a rain-drenched petal, empty and forlorn. Finally, her naked body was revealed in the darkness. It was more perfect and cruelly beautiful than any woman's body I had ever seen in my life. Hanwoo. Finally. She wrapped her arms around my neck and breathed hot air into my ear. I explored her white neck, shoulders, and firm, swollen breasts as I moved down. My body had long since pushed past its limits. When my innate massive desire touched between her thighs, she arched her back like a bow and raked her nails hard down my spine. Sister-in-law, I don't say anything more. Just break me. Fill me completely with that terrible thing you have. The moment her permission was granted, I broke the final lock of family and fiercely dug into her. She threw her head back and let a moan that sounded like a scream. At the overwhelming fullness she'd never felt, her body trembled, and I carved my presence as I pushed through that tight, hot passage. Outside, the monsoon rain pounded the window even harder, and inside, only the dull primal sounds of bodies colliding echoed. Guilt and hesitation were lighter than dust in this hot storm. I gripped her slender waist and moved with more intensity than yesterday, anyone I'd ever been with in my life. Life. Hanwoo, it feels good. Harder, deeper. From that usually spoke with intellectual logic, now only wet, obscene moans poured out. I draped her legs over my shoulders and poured all my energy into her. Her body was as hot as lava, and the sensation of her tightening around me made my mind go blank. We called each other's names, or rather, forgetting even that, we raced toward the edge of pleasure. Sweat mingled together, and our breathing became ragged and tangled. Blood welled up from the nail marks on my back, but even that pain served as the ultimate catalyst. Each time we reached the peak, she bit my ear and wept, and I poured my hot essence deep inside her, without reservation. We explored each other time and again, oblivious to the deepening night. A quiet grand mansion in Pangyo. Beneath the roof where my parents and brother slept, we were committing the most hideous and beautiful crime. Until the rain faded and the bluish hue of dawn crept in, my bed was a mess of the remnants of our desire. But you know, everyone, even that wild night that felt like it would last forever, finally came to an end. As her skin, once burning hot, began to cool in the dawn air, the look in her eyes, as she gasped in my arms, began to change. When I saw cold reason return to those eyes that had been clouded with pleasure, I realized it. That a harsh reality was now waiting for us. You see, even that heated air could not stand against the chill of the dawn. It was just as the monsoon rain that had been battering the windows calmed down, and the world grew unsettlingly quiet. Hee-Jae, my sister-in-law, who had been gasping for breath while drenched in sweat against me, pushed my chest and sat up. Her movements were so ruthlessly fast and cold that I wondered if she was the same woman who, just minutes ago, had wrapped her arms around my neck and moaned for me to go deeper. Sister-in-law! I called her name in a daze and reached out, but she slapped my hand away with a cold glare. Then she picked up her silk slip that was scattered messily on the floor and put it on. As she roughly swept back her disheveled hair, there was sharp reason, not traces of pleasure, etched onto her profile. Hyunwoo, or should I say young master, snap out of it. Her voice was no longer that wet, intimate tone she had been whispering into my ear just moments ago. She had returned to being Seo Hee-Jae, the cold and impeccable law firm CEO. Without even looking in the mirror, she pulled the knot of her slip tight. What happened last night was just an illusion created by this terrible downpour. It was like a mirage that should never have existed, destined to vanish when the rain stopped. My heart sank into the pit of my stomach. It felt as if the fiery sensations that had been burning through my body were instantly turning into the dirty wreckage of a crime at her words. I sat on the edge of the bed and asked in a trembling voice, An illusion? You clearly felt it too, sister-in-law. Inside me you were so hot. Shut your mouth. She cut me off sharply. Even in the darkness, her eyes were shining like shards of ice. She approached me and declared, in a low, firm tone, "This is our first and last mistake. I would rather die than have this ever happen again. Forget that you opened my door, and forget that you ever crossed this threshold. You know well enough that the moment you cross the line, not only the two of us, but this entire family will be ruined." It was cruel. How could the woman who was scratching my back with her nails and calling my name repeatedly until just a moment ago turn into a complete stranger and stab me in the heart so quickly? She glanced at the whiskey glass on my nightstand and let out a sigh filled with contempt. From tomorrow morning we go back to how things were. You as the immature youngest son, and I as the daughter-in-law of this house. If you show even the slightest hint of what happened yesterday or loiter near me, I will do whatever it takes to get you kicked out of this house. Do you understand? With those final words, she walked toward the door without even looking back. The sound of the lock clicking open felt like a gunshot piercing through my heart. Her slender silhouette disappeared beyond the silently opening door. In the space she left behind, only the damp smell of rain and our lingering, briny scent from our heated encounter remained to mock me. I sat alone in the empty room, dazed. The dawn air was biting cold, and the place below me was cooling down vainly, as if mocking the intense victory we had just shared, calling it a fantasy. That is what she said before leaving, but her nail marks were still clearly etched onto my back, radiating a stinging pain. The rain has stopped, and the morning in Pangyo will break elegantly once again, just as it always does. But I knew that the peaceful mornings I once knew in my life were gone forever. She will put on her perfect mask and sit at the dining table again. But I now know the burning fire hidden behind that mask. But tell me, everyone, how could a person ever forget the forbidden fruit they have tasted once? She told me to forget, but as the day grew brighter, I found myself clinging more desperately to the sound of her heated moans than to her cold declaration. When her mask armed with sharp reason appears before me again, will I truly be able to remain the obedient young master she wants me to be? Everyone, the verdict past that dawn was as perfect as it was cruel. As soon as the day broke, the world showed me a dazzling clear sky, as if it had never poured down rain at all. But my heart was still filled with the damp rainwater and her heated scent. When I went down to the living room, sister-in-law Hee-jae was already armed like a perfect warrior. A dark gray suit, a briefcase, and eyes as cold and unwavering as a blade, and she was drinking coffee and reading the newspaper, but as I entered, she gave a very professional nod of her head. "Good morning, young master. Did you sleep well even with all that rain last night?" There wasn't even a trace of the woman who just last night had bitten my ear and begged me to ruin her. I shuddered at her terrifyingly perfect performance. "Yes. Did you sleep well, sister-in-law?" My voice trembled pathetically, but she had already turned her gaze back to the newspaper. In front of my brother and parents, she was once again the pillar of the family and a respected career woman, while I was just the immature youngest brother who caused trouble. But tell me, do you really think that's possible? The forbidden fruit I tasted once became a poison flowing through my veins. She started ignoring me and pushing me away again. When we passed each other in the hallway, she wouldn't even look at me, and she completely ignored my presence at the dinner table. But the more she did, the more my instincts ran wild. Every time she brushed past me, the subtle scent of her perfume overlapped with the damp, musky smell of her skin that had filled my room last night. My daily life completely collapsed. Even when I met friends for drinks or went to my favorite golf course, only one scene occupied my mind. Her back arching like a bow on the white bed sheets, those sharp fingernails grazing my back, and the sensation of her tightening around me. My body was already addicted to her. Every night I searched the corners of my bed for the warmth she had left behind. The touch of her was branded all over my body, and it became a terrible thirst that choked me. "Ah, sister-in-law, please." I called her name over and over in the solitude of my room. But all I got in return was cold silence. As a law firm representative, she led a glamorous life, appearing on TV news and in newspaper interviews. The world admired her intellect, but I knew the truth. I knew how passionately those refined lips had called my name and how those cool, rational eyes had rolled back at the peak of pleasure. That bitter sense of dissonance only made me more of a wreck. Now just smelling her scent made me swell up until I felt like I would burst. To hide my uncontrollable urges showing through my thin trousers, I always had to cover myself with a long coat or a bag. She treated me like a bug and drew a line, but the more she did, the more I was consumed by a destructive desire to trample that line and bury myself deep inside her again. The thirst was turning into madness. I felt I would sell my very soul if only I could reopen the doors to the sanctuary she had closed off. As she turned away from me more deeply, the possessiveness within me grew uncontrollably. It was a vicious fever, a terrible yet sweet punishment met on the threshold of twilight with no cure and no end in sight. Every night I lingered before her door, praying desperately that her calm voice would stir my heart once more. But her mask warned me otherwise. Seeing her offer not even a single crack, I made a resolution that the night she told me to forget was no illusion. I would have to engrave upon her again that this agonizing pain my body remembers is a living truth. Like an unstoppable runaway train, I was now taking the final steps toward the ruin of our family and toward the hell that was her. Everyone, my story too, is now heading toward its end. But is this truly the end? Or is it the beginning of a descent into a deeper hell? Hija, my sister-in-law, has not looked back at me even once since that day. She returned to being the perfect law firm CEO and the dignified third daughter-in-law of this household, acting out a peaceful daily life. But I was neither as clever nor as cold-headed as she was. For my heart had already been held hostage by her back in the sound of that night's rain. 44 years old. People say it's an age to realize all of life's truths and find stability, but I am currently suffering from the most vicious and ugly fever of my life. Should I call this unstoppable emotion toward my sister-in-law, Lise? Or should I call it insane possessiveness? Every time I see her back as she converses affectionately with my brother in the living room, a black flame erupts within me. The hot truth that only I know how I gripped those poised shoulders and what sounds those noble lips let out in my arms slashes at my sanity every night. Hija, my sister-in-law. Every night I lock my door and chase the scent of her that remains like a phantom. My body remembers the traces of that night she told me to forget. The nail marks she left on my back are turning into scars, but her name carved into my chest bleeds more vividly with each passing day. It is a brutal thirst. No matter how much I drink or try to imagine other women, the only thing that makes me burn with desire is that calm and provocative word of hers. Did you get this big just from looking at me? Every time that illusion strikes my ears, I crumble to the ground. She turned away and drew a line between us, but I became a beast, lurking beyond that line, waiting only for a chance to pull her down. Avoiding my brother's eyes, betraying my parents' expectations, and sensing the ruin of my family, I still cannot stop. This forbidden romance found at the edge of twilight was both my salvation and my guillotine. Perhaps she is suffering just as I am. Her fingertips trembling slightly at the dining table, that moist gaze that lingered for a fleeting moment as she passed by me. I want to believe it. That her coldness is merely a mask to protect us, and that her heart is burning at the same temperature as mine. Yin. Today, I pace by my window again, waiting for the stars to fade in the dead of night. Even on nights when it doesn't rain, there is always a monsoon in my heart. The day this fever ends will likely be the day I take my last breath, or the day we all fall into the pit of ruin. But I have no regrets. For the night I stripped away that cold career woman's mask and embraced her burning instincts with my whole body was the only moment I truly felt alive. Everyone, what choice would you make if you were faced with such a cruel fate? Would you curse this foolish man who closed his ears to the voice of reason and answered only the call of the flesh? Or would you understand the solitude of a woman who, having lived her whole life in a cage, finally confronted her true desire? My story pauses here for now, but the dark secret that will unfold beyond those closed doors of the Pengyo mansion will continue. I am ready to throw myself into this fate wherever this endless twilight fever may lead me. That is all for today's story. Forbidden relationship between a sister-in-law and her brother-in-law. What are your thoughts on watching that precarious tightrope walk? If this intense and burning story has left a mark on your heart, please subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. Your single click gives me great strength in preparing the next story. If you have any feelings you'd like to share or words for the protagonist, Hyun-woo, please leave them in the comments right now. I will cherish and read every single comment. Tomorrow I will return with an even more unconventional and heart-wrenching Twilight story. Thank you for listening.